George Lindsay and Frances Bavier got to work together on the set of The Andy Griffith Show, creating a show that has remained fresh in the minds of viewers long after it went off air. The chemistry and touch that each brought to their character helped solidify their place in the industry, marking them as some of the best talents in Hollywood in that era. However, behind it all, a major rift broke out, splitting what would have been an amazing friendship. On the set of one of the spin-offs of the show, Bavier took an action that broke her relationship with Lindsay for life. This attitude of hers also spread through the industry, resulting in a very unexpected outcome for her. Join us as we shine more light on this issue. But first, let's take a look at how it all began for Lindsay. George Lindsay was born in Fairfield, Alabama on December 17, 1928, and grew up in the small town of Jasper, Alabama. His parents were George Ross Lindsay and Alice Smith, and he grew up in a modest home during the Great Depression, where humor seemed an easy way out of most situations. This humor became a part of his personality, and finally grew as one of those very little things that would make him great, define his career, and make him an icon in the entertainment world. Young Lindsay was a ball of energy, curious, and told stories that entertained friends and family members. Despite his free spirit, Lindsay struggled with academics as he was dyslexic at a time when even the term was not popular and the condition wasn't diagnosed. Despite this, Lindsay would make sure that he found a way to adapt and find ways to be successful in academics. Having faced the hard work associated with it, he did manage to graduate from Walker County High School, where he was considered an accomplished athlete, particularly excelling in football, the sport that was a substantial part of his identity. After high school, Lindsay went on to attend Florence State Teachers College, now called the University of North Alabama. At this point, it was clear that acting wasn't in his original plans, but would later find a way into his life, becoming a life-changing decision. While at Florence State Teachers College, he continued with football and also pursued a degree in biology and physical education. At this time, he had the ambition to become a teacher and a football coach since he loved the sport and was willing to pass on the knowledge to youngsters. After Lindsay finished college, he briefly taught at a high school in Huntsville, Alabama, and also coached football there. Although he enjoyed teaching young minds and developing the athletic skills of students, he still felt that something was missing, being a creative urge that wanted more release. George Lindsay's life took a dramatic turn in the course of deciding to do something different from what everyone around him had expected of him, and this was when he decided to try his hands in acting. This was not an easy decision for him to make, since he had to leave the security of a job for the uncertainties of the performing arts. Nevertheless, Lindsay's love for storytelling and his natural comedic talent gave him the courage to take this leap of faith. As a move to hone his talent, he enrolled at the prestigious American Theater Wing in New York City, a training ground for many aspiring actors. Lindsay threw himself into theater, working hard to perfect his craft and committing his time to studying voice, movement, and dramatic techniques. During that period, he understood how great it was to play character roles and express oneself with audiences emotionally. Lindsay began his acting career when he started landing jobs for regional theater productions, along with other small television appearances. At that moment, he never had any idea of the direction that his career would later take. Like many young actors starting out, he found it hard to secure steady employment. However, his persistence and undeniable charm soon brought him opportunities in live theater, where he performed in numerous productions, each showcasing a different facet of his acting talent. It was these early performances on stage that helped him grow in confidence and develop the comic timing that would become synonymous with him. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Lindsay began to appear on several television shows, often as a guest in series such as The Twilight Zone and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. These roles, though small, helped him gain valuable experience and exposure in the competitive world of Hollywood. Lindsay's big break, however, came when he auditioned for a role in The Andy Griffith Show, a television series set in the fictional small town of Mayberry that had become a beloved staple of American television. Lindsay was cast as Goober Pyle, the jovial and somewhat dim-witted cousin of Gomer Pyle, portrayed by Jim Nabors. What was supposed to be a minor character playing Goober grew to be well-loved among the audience because of Lindsay's comic genius and such a lovable performance. He brought with him a perfect combination of warmth and humor that captured small-town charm with his "Goober says hey" catchphrase and perfect impersonations of characters like Cary Grant. With that said, love from the audience catapulted Goober into an entire series of regular appearances in the show, making marks on the show's core by the end. Lindsay ended up becoming one of the most cherished cast members of The Andy Griffith Show because he naturally connected with the essence of Goober and was quite the authentic Southern boy, as associated with the themes of community and simplicity. His chemistry with the rest of the cast, including Andy Griffith, Don Knotts, and Frances Bavier, simply sealed the deal. Not only did Lindsay's portrayal as Goober endear him to his audiences, but it also manifested his knack for physical comedy and improvisation, a factor that made him popular during a time when television was dominated by sitcoms. While The Andy Griffith Show was, in fact, the show that thrust George Lindsay into the spotlight, it represented in many ways the culmination of hard work, determination, and a willingness to take risks. From humble beginnings in Alabama to making the jump from teaching to acting, Lindsay's path to success would be defined by his resilience and steadfast conviction in himself. Though he started off getting small roles, his early acting roles would serve as building blocks for a career that would give pleasure to millions and establish him as one of the most loved faces in American television history. During his time on the show, he got to meet some other amazing actors who helped shape his journey. However, he did have some strained relationships with some. When George Lindsay met Frances Bavier, who would play the iconic Aunt Bee on The Andy Griffith Show, and later on Mayberry RFD, the meeting showed a promise of two actors of great talents coming together. Classically trained with a background in Broadway, Bavier brought an air of depth and poise to her performances that seemed to reach the very heart of her audiences. Lindsay, on the other hand, was light-hearted and jolly, using a lot of his natural comedic talent and Southern charm. Their first interactions were professional on set, and Lindsay admired Bavier's devotion to her craft. As time went on, however, personalities and working styles began to clash, and tensions started to rise behind the scenes. Frances Bavier created the iconic character of Aunt Bee, who was basically the ultimate homemaker who added warmth and stability to the Taylor family in Mayberry. The character exhibited much kindness, hospitality, and a sense of moral guidance whereby she became very motherly to Andy and Opie, as well as the entire community. Her followers loved her because she was a nurturer and the heart and soul of Mayberry. The popularity of Aunt Bee was due to how relatable she was because she was an anchor to domestic life in the simplest and wholesome town. Her viewers also admire her commitment to family values and the unwavering support she gives to every person surrounding her. However, off-screen, Frances Bavier very much contrasts in personality with Aunt Bee. Being known to be reserved, even to the point of being a little irritable at times, Bavier preferred being left alone, and most of the time, her interactions with her cast were pretty burdensome. She never showed anything but professionalism when on the set, yet off-camera, her attitude towards some of the crew members, especially her dislike for George Lindsay's casualness that often made him tease on sets, began to change and create a difficult work environment. This was a jolting contrast from the on-screen persona that many of her colleagues had gotten accustomed to, expecting Aunt Bee's warmth in real life. The relationship between Lindsay and Bavier grew particularly tense during their time working together on Mayberry RFD, the spin-off series that followed The Andy Griffith Show. While Lindsay's portrayal of Goober Pyle continued to delight audiences with his comedic antics and lovable personality, his off-screen interactions with Bavier became increasingly contentious. As discussed in Lindsay's memoir, one incident in particular drove the friction between the two actors. Lindsay remembered one day when, exasperated over what she perceived as his disruptive behavior, Bavier hit him with an umbrella on set. The whole thing had happened so fast that it shocked the rest of the cast. At that moment, Lindsay felt so disrespected and humiliated that it was still seared into his memory many years later. The no-nonsense Bavier probably saw the action as her way of drawing boundaries, but to Lindsay this was a line that she should never have crossed, and it formed the foundation of their fallout. The encounter stirred bad blood between them, and their working relationship never fully recovered. Lindsay would later look back at the conflict in his memoirs and candidly admit the difficulties of working with Bavier. More than that, he said he respected her talent and the hard work she was putting in, but because of her keeping to herself and because of her short fuse, getting near her was quite impossible, and that the umbrella incident was just an example of what their relationship was like, highlighting a difference in personality and attitude towards work. This is exacerbated by Lindsay's humor and light personality, which clashes with Bavier's serious and more reserved personality throughout the series. Despite these personal conflicts, both actors were professionals, so their on-screen interactions went smoothly. Viewers never knew about the fallout as Bavier's Aunt Bee continued to play the patient, understanding one, while Lindsay's Goober brought comedy and lightness to the scenes. This dynamic their characters had was one that remained sweet and reflected the tight-knit community Mayberry was, even if in reality it was considerably more complicated. Regardless of any issue, Frances Bavier's legacy as Aunt Bee remains one of the most cherished aspects of the Andy Griffith Show. She gave such depth and reality to the role that she became one of the beloved figures in American television history. Her fans would write her letters complimenting her performance and, more often than not, were impressed with the character's consistent kindness and moral uprightness. In this, Aunt Bee represented many of the values cherished beyond the confines of the show. Of course, it was quite different for people who had to work with her, and Bavier had plenty of rough days that involved people that she worked with. It was just difficult for her to fit in with everyone. Undoubtedly, the tension between the star and Lindsay turned out to be a vivid example of how professional coexistence with surviving or failed personal relationships happens in a world of entertainment. This complexity is well portrayed in Lindsay's candid memoir on how the entertainment industry functions, with human dynamics shaping the result. He was in equal parts in awe of Bavier's talent and frustrated with their clashes, thus painting a picture of a relationship as multifaceted as the characters they played. However, the eventual friction between Lindsay and Bavier in no way diminished their value to the shows The Andy Griffith Show and Mayberry RFD. If anything, it serves to remind us of the headaches and victories that go along with the process of putting cherished tales and characters together. Frances Bavier had been known to be utterly professional on the sets of The Andy Griffith Show. However, a lot of complaints came up regarding how uptight and highly difficult the personality of Frances Bavier was. While Aunt Bee brought warmth and heart into Mayberry, Bavier had high standards, and sometimes she was described by some people as standoffish. Others also note that while Bavier was never bad, she did nothing to make herself warm or even friendly behind the camera. Tense and demanding of gravity around her, she often just didn't mesh with lighter, more jocular nuances that pervaded most of the set. Ron Howard himself, who played young Opie Taylor, would express in later years that Bavier was intimidating to him. While he was too young then to realize the full depth of adult relationships, he remembered that she would often come off as detached and even antisocial. Andy Griffith himself, the titular star of the show, mentioned in interviews that while he admired her skill, they never were more than cordial colleagues. Griffith said that he sometimes found her aloof, as if she carried the weight of gravity in contrast with the lightness he and others tried to create on the set. Even Don Knotts, the actor known for his humor and who would play the jester Barney Fife, spoke about how difficult it was to develop a strong rapport with Bavier. While the cast members generally shared a rapport with each other outside of work, Bavier was more limited and formal in her interaction. She preferred being alone to socializing with her co-stars, and this made her come across as standoffish. This was compounded by her tendency to correct others or voice her displeasure when she felt the show's tone veered too far into the comedic, as she believed it should retain a wholesome balance. As time went on, Bavier began to realize how her behavior was affecting her relationships on set. The growing feedback about her aloofness and rigidity weighed on her to deeply consider her role in creating unfriendly environments on sets. By all later accounts, she would eventually acknowledge to herself and others that her uptight nature was a product of personal insecurities and deep-rooted perfectionism. This self-awareness began to mark a turning point in her life, as she started to seek help to learn how to better control her emotions. Eventually, her struggles culminated in her leaving the very popular spin-off entitled Mayberry RFD, though the character of Aunt B was still very appealing. Bavier cited emotional exhaustion and an inability to maintain the on-set relationships required as key in her decision to step away. She acknowledged that part of the friction came from her personality traits. Therefore, she felt leaving the show would give her peace and a sense of balance which she never enjoyed in her career. Eventually, when Bavier left television, she retreated to an isolated life. She settled in a quiet home in Siler City, North Carolina, far away from Hollywood. For some reason, she wanted to be far from the entertainment industry. She valued her isolation and wanted to fix all those years of mental agony. Later in her life, Bavier would give interviews in which she would say that she sought professional help in order to understand herself and what she was doing to those who crossed her path better. Through therapy, she learned a great deal about the anxiety and perfectionism that shaped her interactions with people. Though trying to fight through her struggles, in her retirement, Bavier was still largely elusive. Where her former co-stars would periodically reunite for events or nostalgia-based celebrations of the show's legacy, Bavier rarely participated. This was also expressed in her reluctance to be engaged with the public, including the Andy Griffith Show cast, most of whom she hadn't seen or spoken with for many years. The isolation that gave her peace also held regrets for not having been able to connect with people who had formed her professional circle. As time went by, Frances Bavier's absence from the screen made her an enigmatic figure among her own fans. Though many remembered her fondly as Aunt B, few knew the personal battles she had faced or her reasons for retreat from Hollywood. The decision to keep herself aloof from the reunions and media appearances was in sharp contrast to her co-stars, who embraced it all when it came to the continuous popularity of the series. In the last years of her life, until her death in 1989, Bavier lived quietly in her house in North Carolina, rarely going out or mixing with people. Her days were said to have been filled with solitude, and she was said to live a simple life, contented with gardening and reading. People who knew her then said she was very reserved but seemed content with herself. While she was not completely out of the world, her interactions were limited, reflecting a life that had moved away from the spotlight. Bavier's death marked the end of an era for fans of The Andy Griffith Show, as Aunt B was remembered as one of the most beloved characters in television history. Notwithstanding her personal struggles and the conflicts she experienced with her co-stars, one thing cannot be denied, which is the fact that Bavier gave a lot to the show. Her talent for adding depth and authenticity to the character of Aunt B placed her in the hearts of viewers, even when real-life challenges added layers of complexity to her legacy. In retrospect, Frances Bavier's life is one that reminds people of the demands and sacrifices of the entertainment world. Not as warm and open as her on-screen character, she nonetheless did her best to make permanent marks on television history. Her triumphs and challenges throughout the journey proved to be a test of the human experience in so many different ways. George Lindsay continued to be involved with The Andy Griffith Show and all of its various spin-offs, solidifying his position within the Mayberry world as the landscape of television changed all around him. Lindsay continued to portray the lovable and slightly clumsy Goober Pyle in a subsequent spin-off series called Mayberry RFD. The Lindsay character was a series staple, often supplying comic relief with his goofiness and his signature workman's cap. He stole audiences' hearts as Goober and stayed with the series until its cancellation in 1971. The transition of Mayberry from series to series did little to change Lindsay's devotion to the role of Goober. He was the first name associated with Goober because he brought into the character an air of realism and charm that the audience loved. This was extended beyond scripted appearances too, as Lindsay would more often than not attend public events and charity functions in character, a testament to his grasp on the show's place within popular culture. He cherished the fact that Goober was able to reach and entertain so many people through the character's warm humor that appealed across generations. When Mayberry RFD ended, the task facing Lindsay was to build upon Goober's popularity with ongoing success on television and in film. He parlayed the popularity into further acting opportunities. He also appeared in many television series, with many of them being guest appearances on series such as Love, American Style, and The Wonderful World of Disney. This allowed him to be a part of many genres and characters, and showed his versatility as a performer, while he was still able to provide the comedic timing he was known for. Lindsay continued acting long after the show. More noticeably, one of his projects included voiceover work in Disney's The Aristocats from 1970. He was the voice of Lafayette, an awkward and charming hound dog. His distinctive voice and comic delivery made the character Lafayette unforgettable and furthered the association of Lindsay with wholesome, family-friendly entertainment. He did more projects with Disney, including the animated films Robin Hood in 1973 and The Rescuers in 1977, voicing characters that added both humor and heart to those stories. These roles let Lindsay reach a younger audience to ensure his appeal across different age groups. Notwithstanding the success he enjoyed, there is one shocking fact about Lindsay's career. Many have questioned the reason he declined a role on Star Trek. It wasn't until many years later that many would find out Lindsay had been considered for the role of Spock, the now iconic Vulcan science officer in that groundbreaking science fiction series. Lindsay declined the offer in a career-defining move for both himself and Leonard Nimoy, who took on the mantle of Spock. However, the mere notion of Lindsay in this most cerebral and stoic of roles offers a fascinating look into another reality. With Lindsay bringing his comic talents, it would have given Spock a far different texture. Lindsay as Spock would have made a big difference in the Star Trek franchise and his career. This role would have catapulted Lindsay into a genre of movies and television far from Mayberry's down-to-earth humor. Science fiction, with all the cerebral motifs and advanced scenery, would be quite a new territory for him. If Lindsay had joined the show with his humor, maybe playing Mr. Spock would have shown an absolutely new angle of his skills and enlarged his mastery as an actor. He could have taken the chance, but he stayed in his path, steadfast in the roles that suited his comedic strength, even though it meant passing up on the global reach of Star Trek in the process. Since his highly successful work on The Andy Griffith Show and spin-off, Lindsay has continued with an unabashed charm in his work. He became a common figure on a variety of shows like Hee Haw and sealed his reputation as a talented actor. Hee Haw was a natural fit for Lindsay, whose humor and setting fit so well with the comedic sensibilities he had honed as Goober. Such appearances kept him in the public eye, ensuring continued relevance within an ever-evolving entertainment industry. Outside of his acting, Lindsay used his celebrity platform to aid in philanthropic work, especially those benefiting children. He was deeply involved with the Special Olympics, which was very close to his heart. Lindsay's commitment to giving back was a defining feature of his later years, showing he genuinely wanted to use his platform for good. His annual George Lindsay Una Film Festival, which he hosted at the University of North Alabama, allowed up-and-coming filmmakers to show their craft, further reflecting his dedication to nurturing creativity and community engagement. As Lindsay's career progressed, he would revisit the character of Goober in reunion specials and guest appearances. These opportunities allowed him to reconnect with fans of The Andy Griffith Show, celebrating the legacy of Mayberry while reflecting on the enduring appeal of its characters. Lindsay's willingness to revisit Goober underlined his appreciation for the role that had defined his career, even as he sought to explore new creative avenues. Lindsay's career choices and the roads he chose not to take really serve as examples of a man in touch with his abilities and what mattered. Notably, the choice concerning Star Trek will forever remain intriguing, but marked his personal conviction regarding abilities. He took on roles that matched his comedic instincts and rural upbringing, creating a body of work that resonated with audiences on a personal level. That wit and heart at the core of his work made him so beloved on American entertainment circuits. While Goober Pyle might probably forever remain Lindsay's biggest character play, Lindsay's efforts in films, series, and social work presented all-in-one talents and an even kinder spirit. Whether he was entertaining an audience with his humor or supporting causes close to his heart, Lindsay has made a mark on this world that has continued to be celebrated by fans and colleagues alike. Marked by a career sculpted as much by the opportunities seized as the roads not taken, his story has been one rooted in authenticity and a monument to the power of a good laugh. Outside the busy schedules and his career, Lindsay loved his family and maintained close relationships with them, and they were those who stood by his side during his lifetime. Lindsay remained surrounded by family until the day he died in 2012. Lindsay got married to Joyanne Herbert. He had 2 children, George Lindsay Jr. and Camden Joe Lindsay Gardner. Although his marriage to Joyanne ended in divorce, Lindsay's children were a big part of his life, and he always remained close to them. He was very attached to his family and spoke about the love and stability they provide amidst a demanding career in show business. In addition to his immediate family, Lindsay cherished lifelong friendships, many of which had resulted from The Andy Griffith Show. Relationships like these had given Lindsay continuity and comfort, especially in later years. His colleagues and fans often described him as warm and approachable, all traits that extended to the way he treated his family and close friends. Lindsay's compassionate spirit also manifested in his philanthropy. Indeed, a staunch supporter of the Special Olympics, Lindsay was highly involved in the organization, using much of his time and resources to support it. He felt that more had to be given to those with intellectual disabilities, and he did a very good job at it. Lindsay raised funds, but was also actively involved in events, bringing humor and warmth to the participants and their families. The other most significant cause Lindsay championed was education, mainly through the University of North Alabama, his alma mater. His George Lindsay UNA Film Festival has provided a big forum for up-and-coming filmmakers, giving many youthful talents a chance to have their work noticed. This would be indicative of the notion that Lindsay had regarding how much change could be affected by proper storytelling, and in changing those stories into ways of inspiring creativity in a whole generation. Throughout his life, George Lindsay demonstrated dedication through giving back to family, friends, and charitable causes. His legacy is one of kindness, humor, and generosity because his impact reaches much farther than on-screen roles to touch many lives in meaningful ways. This brings us to the end of the video, and you are welcome to check out future uploads. We will see you in the next one.